Welcome back, everyone. We are in day 12 of Advent, and the last time we got together, we were learning about Zechariah and Elizabeth, and I told you that they were going to give birth to John the Baptist. However, we learned that Elizabeth and Zechariah were too old to have kids, and that she had been barren her whole life. But despite being barren, God said that these two people were righteous, despite the fact that society was of a different opinion. So we're going to pick it up today in Luke 1, verses 8 through 10. Here we go. One day, Zechariah was serving God in the temple, for his order was on duty that week. As was the custom of the priests, he was chosen by lot to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and burn incense. While the incense was being burned, a great crowd stood outside praying. Now, you may be a little curious as to what's going on there. So they chose by lot, which means that, it's kind of by chance. Think of like when you hold a bunch of sticks in your hand and whoever gets the short stick has to do the task. It's kind of like that, right? And so he was chosen to go. He was the priest that was going to do the sacrificing for the people that week, okay? And so that's what he did. And he's at the temple doing his thing, and what happens? Well, the crowds outside start to gather and they start to pray. And this is a normal thing because he's offering these sacrifices on their behalf. And he goes into the Holy of Holies to do this, okay? Or some translations you read might say the sanctuary or the inner sanctuary. And basically, we know that this part of the temple is where God's presence would be. And so only the priest was allowed to go in there. Nobody else was allowed to go in there. And so this is what Zechariah is doing at this time. And we're about to encounter a strange event. So here we go. We're going to continue reading verses 11 through 17. Here we go. While Zechariah was in the sanctuary, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the incense altar. Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. But the angel said, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife, Elizabeth, will give you a son, and you are to name him John. You will have great joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the eyes of the Lord. He must never touch wine or other alcoholic drinks. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth. And he will turn many Israelites to the Lord their God. He will be a man with the spirit and power of Elijah. He will prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and he will cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly." Now, let's be honest, that's a lot to take in. So here it is, Zechariah is in the sanctuary, and what appears? An angel. And I have to say, angels aren't what most people depict them at. They're not these nice-looking creatures with harps and are all soft and cuddly. They're not cherubs, right, with little naked butts that are so cute. This is not angels. If you pay attention in the Bible, every time an angel comes around, the person is frightened. The angel tells them, don't be afraid, do not fear. These are fierce beings, okay? So here it is. Zechariah is in the temple, in the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, where God's presence is, and there sitting by the altar is an angel. And so he was shaken and overwhelmed, as we would expect, right? But what does the angel tell him? Don't be afraid. Why not? Because he's bringing amazing news to Zechariah. And that amazing news is that God had heard their prayers. Now, what were they praying for? The next sentence tells us, right? Your wife Elizabeth will give you a son. So they had been praying for children, maybe specifically for a son. And here it is, the angel's coming down and telling them, hey, God heard you, and it's going to happen. And it's exciting. And then he gives him some instructions. First instruction is, you must name this child John. Okay. I mean, if you're going to perform a miracle and me and my wife are going to have a kid, we'll name it John. Why not? And he also says, you're going to have great joy and gladness. The people are going to rejoice. So this is going to be a happy event. He has something to look forward to, and he's going to be great in the eyes of the Lord. And this is going to be something that every parent, of course, is wanting. They're wanting their child to be close to God. But especially for this couple who come from priestly lines, to hear that is such great news, right? Such great news. And he says, but he can never touch wine or alcohol. Okay. No big deal. I mean, that's kind of a big deal back then because they drank a lot of that, but that's not we can manage. And then he says he's going to be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth. Now, think about that. At this time period, they didn't have the Holy Spirit living in everybody. Okay, the Holy Spirit didn't enter people who believed. At this point in time, the Holy Spirit would come down and go to a prophet or a teacher or something like that in moments, right? And then would go away. And so he wasn't living inside of every believer at that point. And so for the child, before he's even born, to have the Holy Spirit in him is a big deal, okay? And a big change, something that's just very odd. And this is important to remember, okay? So even when he's in the womb, he has the Holy Spirit in him, okay? He's going to turn Israelites to the Lord their God. He's going to be a man with the spirit and power of Elijah. I mean, this is big news. I don't know if you know who Elijah was, but he called down fire from heaven. He's considered one of the great prophets. I mean, this guy did a lot, and God enabled him to do a lot of things. And so he's going to be just like that. This is something that is majorly exciting to Zechariah and to the other people when they hear about it. So he's going to prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and he will cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly. That's a pretty big thing. So basically he's saying, he's going to come into the world, and all the people who are kind of not really doing what they need to do, all the people who aren't worshiping God and putting God first in their lives, all those things, whatever he does, it's going to turn their hearts back to God. That's a big deal. And so that's something that you think you'd be pretty excited about, right? So let's read on a little further. Now we're going to read 18 through 20. Zechariah said to the angel, "How can I be sure this will happen? I'm an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years." Then the angel said, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the very presence of God. It was he who sent me to bring you this good news. But now, since you didn't believe what I said, you will be silent and unable to speak until the child is born, for my words will certainly be fulfilled at the proper time." So we can see Zechariah had some doubt, and to us, it might seem reasonable. I mean, after all, they're really old. Not only, have they not had any children, but they are physically incapable of having children at this point in their lives. And yet, when an angel is standing before him, giving him this news, he doubts. So on one hand, we're like, well, it makes sense that he would doubt. But then on the other hand, we're like, you have an angel standing before you, and you're going to doubt what he says, But either way, he did doubt, whether we think it makes sense or not. And the angel did not take that very well. So we find out that the angel has a name, and his name is Gabriel. Now we learn a little bit about what Gabriel does. He stands in front of God and apparently brings messages to humanity on behalf of God. And it was him who was selected to do this for God in this account. So he doesn't like the fact that here he is standing before this man, giving him good news and telling him that God is going to perform a miracle and answer his prayers, and yet this guy is doubting. And because of that, he basically causes Zechariah to be unable to speak until the child is born, when his words are fulfilled. So, and the words that he said, right, which is, you're going to have a child, you're going to name him John, and all of these things are going to happen, right? So until his words are fulfilled, he doesn't get to talk. Now, that's going to get kind of interesting, because he's not going to stay in the sanctuary. He's going to leave. And he's the priest doing the sacrifices. So what's he going to say to all those people outside who are praying and expecting him to come out and say something? And then let's think about eventually he's going to go home and talk to Elizabeth, only he can't talk. So this is going to get interesting. So let's read the next set of verses. We're going to read 21 through 25. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah to come out of the sanctuary, wondering why he was taking so long. When he finally did come out, he could not speak to them. Then they realized from his gestures and his silence that he must have seen a vision in the sanctuary. When Zechariah's week of service in the temple was over, he returned home. Soon after, his wife, Elizabeth, became pregnant and went into seclusion for 5 months. "How kind the Lord is," she explained. "He has taken away my disgrace of having no children." So here we see Zechariah comes out and the people are waiting. They're like, this guy is taking forever. Why won't he come out? And he comes out and he cannot speak. And they're just sitting there like, what's wrong with this guy? And they finally realize by his gestures. So apparently he was gesturing probably like, this thing came down and he was right there and it scared me and he talked, right? And he's gesturing and they don't really know what he's saying, but they're like, well, he must have had a vision, right? And so they're thinking God spoke to him in some manner, but wow, this is weird because he can't tell us. So he spends a week at the temple with this condition, with a bunch of people who are wanting to know what's going on, until he finally leaves and goes home to his wife Elizabeth, who, by the way, doesn't know any of this has happened. So he comes home and somehow informs her. We're thinking that he probably could write because he was a priest. But you know, he can't break the news to her verbally, so he somehow expresses to her what's happening, and she eventually becomes pregnant, and she goes into seclusion for 5 months. And she says, you know, how kind the Lord is, how great that he gave us what we have been praying for. You know, he's taken away my disgrace. So even though Elizabeth may not know everything that's going to go on with her son or her baby, right? Because maybe Zechariah can't tell her, she does know that God has taken away her disgrace. Just like we talked about last time, right? Society did not look kindly upon women who could not have children. And usually if you didn't have kids, you know, it kind of was blamed on the woman, whether it was really her or not. But the fact of the matter is, she was looked down upon. She was ostracized, you know, all because she just didn't have a child. And people thought that she was a sinful person because she didn't have a child. So now that she does have a child and she's pregnant, right, that disgrace that is on her has been lifted. And she's very grateful for that. Now, it says here she went into seclusion for 5 months, and we are not given an indication of why that is. It could have been she was overwhelmed. Maybe, you know, she's older, so maybe this is taking a toll on her body. It could be that, you know, she maybe didn't want to tell anybody right away because she wanted to make sure that the child stayed viable. We have no idea. It could have been any number of reasons, but for whatever reason, she stayed out of society. She kept herself secluded for 5 months, but all that while was praising God for what he has done for her. So here we see the dichotomy that's happening. We've got Zechariah, who is doubtful, and Elizabeth, who is joyful. Those were the responses to the message that God was going to perform a miracle for them. And even though we can maybe kind of understand Zechariah's doubt, you have to understand that the reason it was so offensive is because his doubt was basically telling God, can you really do this? So that's why Gabriel ended up reacting the way he did. Zechariah's doubt wasn't just about the fact that they were old. It was the fact that, can you really do this, God? Can you really take somebody who is so old and give them a baby? And that is what made Gabriel react the way he did. Now, Zechariah didn't say all of that, but if you're doubting because you're old, the next step is, well, that means you think that God can't overcome your physical body. And so that's why Gabriel reacted that way. And so Zechariah's doubt led to really him being not able to experience all the joy of what was happening. I mean, think about that. God's answering your prayer. He's performing a miracle, not just like, oh, you're going to get pregnant, like a miracle. And you can't tell anybody. You can't yell and shout for joy and be excited, right? Because you don't have your voice. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be excited, but he can't share it in the same way that he could had he still had his voice. And then you look at Elizabeth, and she is excited. She, is ecstatic. She talks about how great the Lord is for answering their prayer, and that her disgrace is going to be lifted, in society. Your version may say reproach. And basically what that's saying is the people were treating her as if she were sinful, as if something was wrong with her, that God was mad at her because she didn't have any kids. And so they would treat her that way, right? And she knew probably that people were talking about her behind her back and those kinds of things. And she's old, so she must have learned to live with it. But that's not a great way to live. It's not a great feeling to know that everybody thinks those things of you. And so here it is. God is lifting that by giving her a baby. She now doesn't have to be embarrassed when she goes out into public. She doesn't have to worry about people talking about her in a negative way and all of those kinds of things. Now, it says here that she secluded herself. We don't know why. Could have been any number of reasons. But, the point here is that our response to God's word, to God's message to us, should be one of joy, should be one of excitement to be a part of something he's doing. Even sometimes if the message maybe is a little bit of discipline or something like that, it's good because God is making us into who he wants us to be. And so even when things are tough and even when things are maybe a little crazy, which is what I'm sure Zechariah was thinking, full obedience is the way to go with a joyful heart, right? We didn't see them complaining about the life they had been given. Now they were praying for it to change, but they were considered righteous. And if that's the case, they weren't complaining, okay? We have the whole Old Testament about what God thinks about complaining, and it's not great, okay? So here it is. They've accepted the life God's given them, but God's going to bless them more. And the way we respond to that is with joy. And that is what Christmas is about. It's about us celebrating the joyousness of the season, right? Not just about Jesus's birth, which is a very fun thing, which is a very good thing, but also what his life and death and resurrection has done for us. And then on top of that, we get to rejoice about what's going to happen because we can look at all these things that were foretold that came true, and we can know that the promises God has given us are going to be true as well. And so that gives us something exciting and joyous to look forward to his second coming when he comes back and resurrects us to a new life with him. And so, no matter what is happening, we can hope in that. We can have joy in that. And so that's what I would take away tonight is remember the differences in the reactions to God's word and think to yourself, how am I reacting to God's word? Am I jumping in and getting on board with God, or am I resistant? And we want to not be resistant. We want to jump in there with God, to obey him, even if it's a waiting game, to wait with joy, right? Till it's our time to do whatever it is that he's wanting us to do. And so as we wait for the next part of this account, I just want you to think about that. How am I obeying God? How am I jumping in with him? Am I doing it with a joyful heart, or am I doing it with grumbling, or am I doing it with doubt, right? Because God can really do anything. And if we truly believe that, then we're not going to ask a question like Zechariah did, right? We're just going to be joyful. So think through that, pray on that, And next time, we will see what happens next with Zechariah and Elizabeth.